So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet, known as Isaiah. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the Savior, the Messiah, and his holy cities that were laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Isaiah the prophet, known as Yeshayahu, we then read the 61st chapter and also chapter 1:8, and then establish what it means, congregation, as far as when the real Savior came. And interestingly enough, the Savior himself, when he told his people to establish then tabernacling as per the instructions of Moses, and then 1,000 years later, then the life there were only in the holy cities was then distributed only to those who were loyal to the covenant, loyal to the holy cities, was then mixed up with the world for some time. And then a section in Luke explains then at the end of times, people are going to be given into relationships and matrimonies and so on and so forth. And they're going to be caught in a day where they do not expect. So then, the holy feasts we then understand as the very principle of structuring of the times and the seasons. Factual. It's not religious, but factual. The distinction is always related with the instructions, and the Torah is always factual. Now, the Torah plays psychology in minds of the people. They think they're going to get mixed up with religion, and truly the Torah and the prophets and the writings is purely factual. What causes then religion is the lack of understanding of the holy instructions themselves. Give an example. When I first got in my matrimony, my relationship, for instance, my wife and her family were very religious, but they were not knowledgeable of the holy instructions. So then the lack of knowledge of the instructions and the prophets causes religion. And quite sure enough, my ex-wife fled her own family because they were so religious. So then, the cause of religion then is directly related with the lack of facts. We also understand the importance as per Revelation, for instance. Though the Savior said there would not be a temple built on Mount Moriah, as far as he himself as tabernacling, he won't be ever built again as far as him as the center of the temple, because he was then obviously indicating the second tabernacle services. It's only factual. The fact is simple fact. So then, the third temple, as we know of, obviously they are thinking on building it. Now, there is a distinction of what then Moses instituted as then the sacrifices of animals, and those we don't do those anymore. those were already completed. That's why then you have the writings of Hebrew, because when then the Mashiach, then he was explaining, he was not going to be involved with the construction of a temple, being part of it, because his objective was then tabernacling, was then many of the cities, they were going to be built as per the instructions of Moses, but then building a tent, not an actual building made with stones. Yet then Israel wants to build the third temple, and as we know, this third temple is depicted on Daniel the 11th chapter as the abomination that makes desolate. Abomination, it's because the Messiah himself, he said, not a stone is going to be left upon another. So the Messiah was indicated another fact, that then those sacrifices, those rituals were already completed. So then it's very obvious, if you have the first section of the instructions that were based on rituals, based from sacrifices of animals, and it was then completed, whatsoever is left then obviously is factual. So then what causes religion is the lack of knowledge of the instructions. So then there are sections, for instance, of Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, where you find in the autumn feast. The autumn feast is simply revelation, is what is yet coming in the future. But then the holy cities are then returning as per the instructions of the prophet, a prophet that was sawn in half. Now then, people, when they understand the holy instructions, they no longer make a religion out of it, then people around, they get very edgy. That's why then, when the rich man was then in Sheol, or then was tormented, he then was reminded of Lazarus. Now, religion never plays a part during this time of the restoration period. It's simply factual. Now, there is obviously worship involved with the holy cities. That's the only situation involved, but rituals are no longer active. Now then, Israel wants to build the third temple, and they are reinstituting the sacrifices and ceremonies of the Old Testament. That's why then when you read the Daniel 11th chapter, you find the abomination that makes desolate, because if we understand there is no relationship with his son based from sacrifices, try to understand, then they are linking the relationship with the Creator with sacrifices and ceremony once again. So he points that there is no Savior coming, making an abomination of the whole lot. So then, the facts are so simple that makes any person who has a bit of understanding then to read. Daniel the 11th chapter shows many sections related with the time of the Gentile level during this restoration period. We understand in 09 ended the 1,000 years of the city, or then simply a fact of the holy cities were then destroyed. It was then a date of the ending of these 1,000 years of period of time. Another fact. Now you have then the first 1,000 was already completed, then the Messiah and his cities were then obviously placed aside. Then you have another 1,000 years, and any person can make a calculation. You have at least a couple of thousand years ever since the Messiah ascended. So you can understand 1,000 plus 1,000, couple of thousand. But then religious organizations, the lack of understanding is so much, and they say some people, because the 1,000 years of the Savior is yet coming, and they make such a mixed up understanding of these, and unfortunately people get caught up with it. They get caught in the midst of it. And they don't have no clue, and some people are very honest. They want to understand, but the problem is when then people are showing, then they get angry. Daniel 11 shows many sections related with this time of trade. Explains of United States, for instance, leasing the system from China, because there is a huge disparity of China leading 57% of the world's market, and United States has a very weak economy. So the section related with the despised one is a situation related with the spies as being weak. It was then a system, then a gradual, timely decades then became weaker. But then we understand also the USD is widely used in the world yet. And China is responsible for the implementation of the Dragonic period. Simply means precision via computer. Once again, when people hear of the Dragonic period or dragon, they get religious. They are thinking on religion, and they are thinking of bad and then evil versus not evil, and they're thinking of the Savior because they don't understand the holy instructions. China then holds the launching of this system, and also we understand ISIL, or the Islamic State, is then becoming a very strong force. We understand also they're going to be gathering in Egypt, and we understand at some point they're going to civilize themselves a bit and join then the region, because there is a point where then Egypt and the Islamic State and Arab nations are going to control because of the price of oil. So this means that whatsoever the United States is doing in the Middle East is not going to work. It's not going to work not because they have a lack, for instance, of desire of doing what is right. That's not the point. It's because of the price of the oil. And the price of the oil is going to ultimately it's going to force the United States to adopt the Chinese system, but as a leasing document. Now, the situation is Daniel 11 does not show how this term of lease is going to be. It only shows that China is then obviously holding more than 50% of the world's trade, and they are going to come up with a document as far as the terms of this new system, and the United States is going to adopt, or they're going to lease this system, and the leasing period is permanently. As far as the linkage of every nation with the US, and then every nation, and then China, it is as the USD is used versus the Chinese yen is used. So then the complexity of the computerized system is truly enormous. Now, it is because there is not yet set rules and regulations as far as what people purchase with other monetary systems not linked with central banks. And then monetary systems linked with central banks. And then the card, or the government properties card, where permits the user of doing trade in a certain country, yet whatsoever person can do in the computer based from investments or then purchases, transfers, then deduction of taxes must be done instantly. So the system is truly complex, but at the same time the principles of such is very simple. Now, for example, we know the United States and its economy is improving. Now, the improvement substantially is not going to come from the plans of the United States, but from this leasing of this new Chinese system. Now, Daniel 11 is not in chronological order. The chapters of Yeshayahu, known as Isaiah, is not in chronological order. The events are set by topics. So then, since we understand a bit of this complexity of USD with relation with the yen, or the Chinese yen, then let's observe what some of the countries are doing, because the most important point is linking computers with central banks. For instance, Brazil is going through lots of trouble in the government. The government of Brazil has no plan for the future. This country is absolutely stagnated, and there are absolutely no plans. There are some sketches what the government is then posing as then for the people to believe. There is absolutely no plan in this country of tackling infrastructuring and also linkages with governments and computers. As far as governments was trying to say is states governments, and then computers, and then linked with the central bank. For instance, the postal service of Brazil is absolutely outdated. Believe it or not, when they deliver you a package at home, you have to sign it at a clipboard. Kid you not. The postal service of Brazil is then as if it was during the time of Second World War in America. So since the government has absolutely no substantial plan of working with infrastructure, Brazil is absolutely up for grabs as far as the freighting in this country. This absolutely is a great chance for FedEx, UPS, and the transportation companies of the United States, because truly they have one of the best deals in America, or in Americas. So then, this government has decided of not investing in infrastructure as far as oil refineries. And it was a period of roughly 10 years where then the expenses were mounted greatly, but while there was GDP, they were able at least to get some development and then some infrastructuring. But let's say, for instance, the United States, yesterday was the price of the oil drum was 48.28. In Brazil, for instance, if the oil is below 80, the price of the drum, then the state's company, they absolutely have no profit. And they have invested a very large amount of money in the state's company, and the company is absolutely bankrupt. So the point is then related with linkages. Linking and linking and linking the system. Now, as we understand, ISIL is then becoming more and more and more prominent. The leaders of the Middle East are becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and they control the oil. And the freighters of the earth are then linked directly with Arabia, because they want the best prices of oil, so then they can do their job. It's not a plot or some sort of situation trying to go against any kind of a government. It's simply where you find the best price, then you buy. So then the delivery system in Brazil is yet very precarious. They don't even have a DIAD of making deliveries yet. They have to do on a clipboard, and then they have to go to the headquarters or then the local postal service, and then secretaries must type the information in the computer. It's extremely laborsome, very outdated, and not on time. Now, there is space for improvement. Truly there is. But the problem is the government is playing novels with the many political parties, so they are not interested on working on development. They may say it on television and sometimes via then interviews, because they show an understanding of wanting to do and wanting to work on the economy, but truly from behind they do not even care. So then, I used to work for United Parcel Service, and truly it's a great company. Very highly organized. And the postal service in this country is truly ready for a new change. Now, in improving systems, improving internet signals, improving then transportation, the situation is, in Brazil at the moment, the most important is then buying via computer, via internet, and obligating the government to work on infrastructure and then deliver the packages. The GDP of Brazil this year is 0.1%. The economy is absolutely ruined. There is another strike coming up next month on the 12th. But then once again, they have no cards to play. The government on one side, printing money, printing for themselves. On the other side, you have the people wanting change, and the government does not want to change. They want to play novel. It is one party versus the other, because if one says tomato, the other say tomato, and then it doesn't get resolved. So then is a great chance for transportation companies of US making a move down south and then do some organizing. Next time I'm going to talk more of this situation, because it's truly linked with then oil, because this country yet has lots of oil deposits, but because of the so higher taxes, it's becoming unprofitable. And also, generation of electricity can be easily pumped from the ground and then burning directly in a boiler or then in a burner, and then generating steam and then generating electricity. So there are many ways of working on the economy, but the government refuses. So the next time I'm going to evaluate this more. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.